again in studio, this time about elite Africa and very, very hard topics in Africa, but also some sort of world together with family. And if all world is my family, of course, we are again somewhere next to the fruits in Africa. The different herbs, of course, can build better floor mouth, but also a better therapy for self if you're doing any form of poetry or even any form of finance. It's not easy to understand Africa, but also world and different forms of the city together with ginseng. Of course, it's not easy to understand aromatic forms, especially for those that are actually also psychic or even coding. Homeopathic things are also not simple, especially not in medicine. It is not easy to understand different forms of simple botanical code, but also to understand green forms, especially in my novel. To understand Renaissance is also not simple, especially you should ban off any earthly forms because are extremely, extremely strange and even poison if you didn't know before. To understand different forms of herbalists is also important if you want to improve your life, especially if you think about more than your own city and you think about more people. Then, of course, that become more and more Africa, some sort of world full of African desert. And of course, the desert need a lot of water. But in Africa, there is no water, so the water become more expensive. To understand more toxic self is actually more important than evolving self. In that way, you can actually stop working. In that forum, you'll start to developing millions of vitamins. Also in my structure and company together with people I work with. Those are different forms of the legends and heroes I work with. But of course, once we together, also with vitamins, we can only meet ourselves in great Africa. To understand those spicy species, it's not easy, but also different forms of the fruits. Some people even have hallucinations. They are working together a lot. Some people work, and of course, they also hallucinate how someone might be more evil or more good. But of course, those are only working hallucinations. To understand precisely life, it's not easy, but also different forms of the potions together with novel. There are, of course, also millions of flowers in this world that can heal, but also very, very, very difficult forms if you are thinking about any form of the ink that might be extremely poisonous if you would eat it or drink it. So don't. To understand traditional forms together with minty form of code is also important if you are thinking about more ethics on a platforms. But of course, on different forms of the stations around the world, there might be very, very tricky to build anything traditional because usually there is this extreme, extreme mass. There is some chemistry also in fabrics you can have with people, but do not forget, people in fabrics work like crazy, and usually they also are crazy because they are working so much. To understand different forms of the diets is important for women, especially for models, but those can become extremely, extremely toxic. Usually, those models also think that they should not pay anything for evolution, and of course, that is complete nonsense. With that type of statements, those women, also some men, are actually becoming worth zero. That is 100% very, very difficult to work with them if they don't understand simple forms of the elegance together with the brands or logos or simple forms of the company. So sometimes it's also, especially in pharmacy, easier to work with different forms of the economists. Not easy to understand all forms of antibiotics, but also to keep ethics in life. Ethics are actually very important. With ethics in medicine, you can actually also find acupuncture, which is, of course, part of my Taoism clinic. That's very, very important to understand if you want better and better skin. And of course, do not think that all people should be on a diet. That's completely wrong. Men should actually eat much more. But it's also very important to wash your mouth 3 times a day. Of course, if you do that more time, that is not simple ethics and you are an expert. Usually, doctors also drink caffeine. That is not easy, especially if you observe them from the Taoism point of view. You should actually get some lemons in, and you'll see that everything you do in life it becomes some sort of art or medicine art form together with minerals. Not easy to understand those smoky doctors or different forms of people that want to become experts on the medicine areas. Sometimes those are even chemicalias. Don't be too curious about healings. It's very important to keep the golden standards together with the simple medicine without any necessary guess of the code or platforms. But of course, some pure code sometimes is also important. And if you build more code, nothing wrong with that. But you'll also find some bugs, ladybugs and different forms of lady that's going to go on your nerve, and you'll see that it's not easy to work with different forms of lady. They should be in special costume, the costume devil or costume angel. Those two costumes are actually very, very difficult. Some sort of imagery, not easy to understand all forms of nature in life. To understand mushrooms, it's also not easy because some mushrooms are poisonous and some actually heal the skin and human. So they are also medicine if you use them right. In world full of Africa, there is a lot of sweets, especially for old people or younger. And you should actually avoid all those sweets, also the picture sweets and leader sweets and work sweets full of sugar and beautiful vitamins that people think about for very cheap money. To understand work, it's not always easy. And of course, if you are boss of the company, it's very important to understand astrology together with vitamins. Not all people can understand that form of art. Forgetting on art when it comes to my novel, for me, it's very, very important, focusing more on different forms of foods, but also commenting with some time, which is very popular under 40. Different forms of aromas take place together with political novel forum, but of course those political speeches are usually not for me because they're too loud or extremely noisy, especially where they are dangerous they do not do a lot. To understand nutrition, it's very, very difficult in life, but also different forms of the peppermints. The peppermints are some sort of nutrition, but usually some sort of herbs also. To understand thousands of herbal teas in our company, it's also not easy. The brand include a lot of forms. It's not easy to understand different forms of Vedas, but also the blood work. To understand different forms of the matrix together with elegance is not easy, but also to understand some reality that come with simple knowledge, not too much knowledge, and of course not too much talking in real life. Of course, the fictional is simple visual form. It's also not easy, and we do not like to over talk about any forms of the diets. To understand diets, it's not easy, and every woman after pregnancy should actually take a diet for a month or two. But of course, those include very healthy teas. Not all people understand the deities well. To understand different cures is not easy, but also, if you think about anything more social or more TV, even community, you should actually think about sugar also. People actually think about sugar a lot, but when you think about sugar, you should actually think about cancer. Sugar is actually extremely poisonous and usually applied to a modern age. On that point, I would actually refer back for 10 or 20 years, maybe even 30 or 40. How in that time people actually respected foods. There was no sugar, and people might be slightly actually more healthy. But in modern time, there is more mints. Minting is very difficult and it comes together with different forms of coding. Also, to understand different forms of crystal. In my book, it's not easy because it's very complex and difficult character. Different forms of coding cryptograms take place together with the other forms, but to understand different forms together with cold weather is also important. If you are going to study weather a lot, you should actually think about different forms of the weather. And weather, of course, also is applied to different forms of intelligent code. To understand also what weather means or how it could be applied to different medicine or even health is extremely difficult and some sort of philosophy. In medicine, ability is not the most important. It is very important to have very simple heart, but also some knowledge. Without knowledge and some emotional intelligence, all abilities fall far away. So sometimes when it comes to most complex things in medicine, you should actually study simple monkeys or the most tropical forms of Africa. The Africa tells us a lot about humans or what this world is, what my family is. What is this world? The primary simple world, the primate culture, different forms of the language together with different forms of primate species, the amazing humans, monkeys philosophy, mythology about myself, different forms of religion that people believe in, and some people even believe in science. Not easy to understand